From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
After decades of planning and delays,
we've been waiting for this project, the train project, for last gazillions years.
The South Coast Rail Service, bringing commuters from southeastern Massachusetts to Greater Boston, is now up and running. But the launch had its bumps, and the ride to Boston is indirect. How's it going 6 months in? We'll discuss that and much more with our guest this week on Newsmakers, New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi. New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell, good to have you on the program.
Great
Welcome
to
back.
Be here as always, guys. Yeah.
Why don't we tackle South Coast Rail? It launched 6 months ago, I believe, in March or so. Are they still working out the kinks, or is it moving along well? How's it going?
Well, I think it's moving along fine, right? It's long in coming. I think people are pleased that it's finally arrived. My position has been, as you've heard in the past, that it's a good thing for us to have as a direct connection to Boston. We refer to it, at least I do, as intercity rail, because it's not exactly a short route to Boston. It's a 95-minute train ride, but so it's not really a commuter route in the ordinary meaning of that term. But I think overall, people are pleased that it's there. People go to events in Boston and skip the traffic. People from Boston come to New Bedford and are visiting things like the New Bedford Whaling Museum and other sites in New Bedford. And so great that we have that. It turns out also that shortly after that announcement, we also announced the opening of regular commercial air service to Boston. So it kind of underscores the distance between the two cities. And so having, just as a general proposition, having those kinds of connections between cities is a good thing for both, especially for us.
Besides opening day, have you used it?
I have not, no. In fact, I didn't even make it all the way to Boston. I made it to Taunton for one of the, I guess the ribbon cutting. Yeah.
We did have some. There were some part of why I think Tim's line of questioning is there were some reports in those very early weeks of like not having trains on the weekend because there weren't enough conductors. It sounds like that's quieted down and seems smooth.
We have not heard those complaints. The complaints of late have been sort of
noise.
The more usual ones, which is they're blowing the horns and at all odd hours, and I think that's something that we can work with the MBTA to work out. But we're glad we have the service. We've never seen it as sort of this this means of ushering in prosperity, Boston level prosperity into southeastern Massachusetts. We've been working on the cards in our deck to grow the economy, and we've had a good run of that. Well, that's what we'll continue to do, and this is just this will complement our work, I think.
One last train question, we'll move on. I saw a Globe story the other day about people in Greater Boston moving to Fall River because prices being a huge reason, but then the train being a piece of the equation. And I'm just curious, now that the trains are actually running as opposed to being a 30-year hypothetical, are you getting any a little pickup in calls from developers who want to take a look at the city or anything that's different from before the trains had actually started, or not really seeing that yet?
Not in a material way. It's really too early to tell. I would think the question we've had is whether the new remote work arrangements that so many employers have embraced and some are backing off from these days, whether that will mean that more folks will be willing to live in Greater New Bedford and spend a day or two in Boston and take the train in. I think it's a little too early to tell, frankly, to say with any kind of confidence.
I want to talk to you about your police department. The Boston Globe Spotlight team published a series called Snitch City, which outlined allegations of widespread misconduct within your police department, specifically around the misuse of confidential informants. You have asked the FBI and an outside law enforcement expert to look into it. But my question to you is, the Globe reported that you refused to be interviewed for this piece. Why?
Yeah, there's a really good reason, and it has nothing to do with what took place or didn't take place in the police department. It has everything to do with the way the Boston Globe went about casting its series. It called the series about the New Bedford Police Department Snitch City. The title, the label they used refers to the entirety of 100,000 people who live in New Bedford. It doesn't refer to the police department, and it reinforces all the old tropes that the Boston media had.
But let me stop you.
But it's really important because this is something. This is something.
But why wouldn't you want that in the story? If you're pushing back at the story, why wouldn't you want to say this and defend your police department in the main piece?
Well, I'm never going to defend police misconduct. Right?
Whatever,
So
but the
that's-
message
so-
you're trying to
right.
say here
Yeah.
was absent from the investigation because you didn't talk.
No, it wasn't. They had already labeled it and were already promoting it before they even called for an interview. So, no, this was baked, and this was, and so they used this as an opportunity to promote what they do, which is, they do investigative work like you guys. You guys, Channel 12, would never have done that to New Bedford. If you did you guys do investigative work on police departments, on municipal officials all the time, but you don't take on the whole place, the whole city or town as it may be, and label it in a way that reinforces stereotypes. So we have a little more self-respect than that, and so that I'm not about to participate in that. All that said, what matters to me isn't sort of the name calling that the Boston Globe has decided to engage in. What matters to me, frankly, is my police department operating the way that it should. There are things that needed to be corrected. What was left out of that story fundamentally is that the work that the city had done on its own initiative before anybody from the Boston Globe descended upon New Bedford to actually try to improve the department. We invited in one of the top law enforcement consulting agencies in the country, Jensen Hughes and Bob Wasserman in particular, who've worked with Bill Bratton for many years and been really as a luminary in policing in the United States, to look under the hood, to take a top to bottom review of the whole department. That work was ongoing for a while and is continuing to this day. And so it's one of these cases where, and you guys will appreciate this, where sometimes reporters from the outside will come in and get certain factoids right but miss the story. The story was, yeah, there were some problems, but guess what? New Bedford on its own volition was working on them. This is not a dysfunctional police department. In the last 10 years, violent crime has dropped in New Bedford some 60%. You can't achieve that kind of success with a dysfunctional police department.
I guess the question I was left with, putting aside differences between you and the Globe's disputes over how the reporting was gone about, you've been mayor a long time. We've covered you a long time. Yeah. You were a prosecutor. You have the impressions you're a law and order kind of guy. Yeah. How much does the buck stop with you if the police department had enough problems and you're having to bring in the outside consultants? You said you were taking steps already. Right. I mean, did it fester for too long?
Well, so look, I'm never going to defend any kind of police misconduct. The police operate best when they've established a level of trust and legitimacy with the public, and that's a tough thing to maintain over time, but you have to maintain it. My own feeling is, yeah, of course it stops with me, but that's exactly why we actually invited in outside consultants, which I think you guys know we spoke about publicly, and it had been reported on well before the Globe arrived. That didn't make it into the Globe's narrative, and so here we are today, still doing that work. We have a new police chief now, Jason Thody, who was a very successful police chief.
Did you pick an outsider on purpose because of this? He
was the best candidate, hands down. Yeah, he was the best person for the job. He had a record of lowering crime in Hartford, some 31% over his 5 years in office. He got the Hartford Police Department out from a state consent decree that had been in place for almost 50 years. And during the George Floyd protests, they had some 199 protests and not a single arrest. So they did pretty well under his leadership. Hartford did. And we're lucky to have him, and his marching orders in part are to implement the recommendations that were made in the Jensen Hughes report. There's another report coming out by yet another consultant called 21 Century Policing, which is headed up by Chuck Ramsey, and the consultant that we have in particular is Kathy O'Toole, the former police commissioner in Boston and Seattle, doing that work. So the bottom line, I offer all this up as a way of explaining, again, missing from the Globe's reporting, that New Bedford's done a whole lot of hard work without anybody's prompting to improve its police department, and not, frankly, resting on its laurels. We had this huge drop in crime in the city, and then we didn't sit back and say, oh, everything's wonderful. No, things need to be not only made better, but made better in a sustainable way, and that's what we've been doing.
All right, we're overdue for a break. When we come back, our conversation with our guest, New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell, continues. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell. Ted?
I want to play some video and get your reaction to it. So earlier yeah, we've got you in there. No, it's not that kind. Earlier this week, those Texas House Democrats were going around the country as they're fighting about the redistricting in their state. They visited Boston. They held a news conference with Governor Healy, as well as longtime Secretary of the Commonwealth, Bill Galvin. Let's listen to one of the questions a reporter asked and how Galvin answered.
Your critics say that there is present-day gerrymandering in Massachusetts. They are Republican critics, and they say, look at the southern part of the state, New Bedford, Fall River. There are Republicans down there. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say, first of all, Fall River and New Bedford are now in the same congressional district. So if that was an argument once upon a time, it no longer is. And also, I think if you look at the overall, about 9 seats, they're very geographically balanced.
Oof. Now, all three of us know New Bedford and Fall River are not in the same congressional district.
Not,
this
no.
was, in fact, a major point of contention. I remember you sent a letter. Joe Kennedy was involved. Jake Auchincloss had his own point of view. Is it telling that one of the most powerful and politically savvy Democrats and veteran people on Beacon Hill doesn't actually know that about this region?
So I have a lot of respect for Bill Galvin. I think he's very good at his job as Secretary of State, which probably more than most elected positions requires a certain level of technical skill. I mean, he's got to be in the weeds on elections and on corporate governance and a number of other things.
Public records.
Public records, yes. Well, obviously he got that wrong. I'm not going to begrudge him too much for that. It's not the first time that folks in Boston have gotten basic facts wrong about New Bedford, but that's okay. That's one of the reasons why I try to insinuate myself into lots of policy discussions in Boston, because if I weren't assertive, our word wouldn't get out.
While we're talking about perceived snubs, there was a headline on the WBSM website the other day that caught my eye. Quote, Healy snubs New Bedford Portuguese feast again. This was the governor. It wasn't her schedule. I got her public schedule. I thought she was coming, and then in the end she said she couldn't make it to the Portuguese feast. You're an ally of Governor Healy. I don't expect you to say, I'm sure you're going to say she was busy, but would you advise her to make sure she gets there next year in an election year?
I think. So I am an ally. I've known her for a long time. I went to college with her, and so I have a lot of respect for her. And she's been there with me. She's made the rounds. She's made malasada with me, and we soaked our hands in the same grease and all that. So she's familiar with the feast. I think it's in her enlightened self-interest to attend the feast. It is, we believe, certainly one of the largest, if not the largest, ethnic festival in the United States, and there's a lot of good feeling there. Channel 12 is a sponsor, I think wisely so, for all the same reasons.
Maybe I should disclose that.
Yes,
you did it for us.
Thank you. So she should, but look, we elected officials, people, especially executives, have competing demands on their time, and I don't want to presume that she had something less important on her schedule. So Kim Driscoll, the lieutenant governor, was there. We made the rounds. And she spent a good hour and a half or 2 hours there. So, look, the administration's making their presence felt. I get what some of the folks are saying back home. All else being equal, I'd say, yeah, she should probably go, and I'll make sure to remind her of that.
Before your life as mayor, you were an assistant U.S. attorney in Boston. You worked in the Whitey Bulger task force, and you were a federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. Some real criminal justice bona fides there. So I want your take on what is happening at the Department of Justice under the Trump administration, and I'm curious if you talked to former colleagues still working under the DOJ umbrella and what kind of feedback you're getting.
Yeah, I do from time to time talk to some of my former colleagues, but their take on things is not surprising, which is there are lots of folks who won't speak publicly, but who are, especially the career folks, who are deeply concerned about what's going on in the department. I am, just from the outside, watching it like everybody else, and it's just it's a little gut-wrenching sometimes to see just how politicized the Department of Justice is, and some of the folks who are put in positions of authority who don't have backgrounds in federal law enforcement, who don't have sort of the legal chops to be in positions they're in. So
you're referring to Kash Patel, the head of the FBI?
Yeah, well, so he's a great example. Although he was a federal prosecutor briefly, he is known primarily as being a talking head and one who sort of indulges in conspiracy theories about the deep state and such. And now he's the head of the FBI, and he's having to run what is arguably the premier law enforcement agency in the world. It's a little scary. I don't think he's qualified for that job. I don't think his deputy's qualified for his job. But look, the department, I spent many years in the Department of Justice, and I bought into the culture of just calling them as you see them, without fear or favor. You make calls and you do the best you can in exercising your judgment about what's just and what's not just, and you try to do that without any kind of political frame. And when in my time, both in Washington and at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, you really didn't know who was a Republican and who was a Democrat among your colleagues. People just tried to use the best common sense. They're to use common sense, try to use their best judgment in light of their experiences and knowledge of the law to get it right. And I think the department is starting to lose that.
We have only about a minute for a break, but briefly, we've seen lots of headlines about immigration raids, ICE enforcement, picking people up in New Bedford. How disruptive has that been in the city? Is it getting overblown? What's the feeling on the ground?
Yeah, it's not good. I'll say this right up front. I'm all for deporting criminals, right? And I prosecuted folks who were without immigration status in the U.S. and they were promptly deported to places like China and Mexico and other points around the world. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. What I do take issue with is that it's, despite the administration's rhetoric, it has become so much more than that. A little more than half of the people who have been picked up so far by ICE nationally have had no criminal records, and certainly the case in New Bedford as well. There is no movement toward any kind of real immigration reform now. Immigration reform that says, yeah, we should have a secure border. We should be clear about who gets to stay and who has to go, and so forth. And so what's happening now is really arbitrary. It's for performance. It's for show, and it's not good for not just the people who are directly involved, but also the places where they live.
All right, let's take a break. Our conversation with New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell continues. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell. Mayor, the New Bedford Light was doing a story on your travel. I'm not going to grill you on that, but your administration initially demanded over $4,000 just to see your expense reports, public records, and the state ruled those fees were unjustified, I think twice. Look, critics say excessive fees like this are designed to discourage people from requesting public records. Were you using those fees to chill the transparency and disclosure here?
No, we charge the fees that are legally authorized under Massachusetts law, and there's a reason.
Well, Galvin disagreed, didn't he?
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that I agree with his decision, but when reporters ask for public records, that's part of their job. There are things that should get out into the public realm, and frankly, we lead a very transparent organization. We want records to be out in the public realm. People can make what they wish of them. Where things go awry, though, is that, and you see this all the time, where the reporters will ask very broadly for some large set of records that sucks up a whole lot of time of municipal officials digging those records out, doing email searches, having them reviewed by attorneys, and there's a big bill for taxpayers at the end of the day, right? There are real trade-offs in the public record law. You want transparency, but on the other hand, it's not for free. Municipal officials actually have to go digging up that stuff and review it, and there's a cost to it, and the cost is not nearly recouped by the public. The law doesn't allow. The law actually caps the work at $25 an hour, which is hardly reflective of the market rates for the people who are involved in the review. So, what we do is we follow the law, and we tell people this is how long it's going to take to produce those records, and that's how the bills generate. We get a lot of public record requests.
I'm sure if we had more time, Tim would be grilling you pushback, but we do have to get some other topics, and only have a few minutes left. The waste processing facility, yes. And I think it's the far north end of the city.
It is.
There was a town meeting last night, or a community meeting discussing it last night. Your position, as I understand it, is while you understand the people there do not want it, you don't think you can legally block it. You've put together a mitigation effort.
Right.
Have you heard anything that's made you rethink that position?
Well, the short answer is no. So early on when this facility was proposed, my initial reaction was, look, I'd rather have a chip plant. I'd rather have, some other manufacturer on that site and not a municipal waste facility. Initially, they proposed a municipal waste facility and a biosolids processing facility, right? And so we looked at that and we said, look, the zoning, we brought in expert counsel, an attorney who specializes in these kinds of projects, and we said, he said, look, you guys are going to lose at the state level. The zoning allows it, the state law allows it, and the best you just need to make the best of it. So the best of it we made was we got the company to agree to drop the biosolids portion, the more objectionable aspect of
obviously this hasn't satisfied the people in that neighborhood.
But we're also charging a tipping fee that we wouldn't otherwise be able to charge under state law, and we're also getting most favored pricing if the city were ever to use that facility, which is significant. So the city's going to get some money out of this, which is better than nothing. Because
might the city have to use that for rat control? Like that's the big concern of the neighborhood, right? It's a rat magnet.
No, I think that's manageable, right?
Okay.
So and I know in the news we had this issue with rats at another municipal facility because there was a fire and all that, right? But the bottom line is, we made the best of what was a difficult situation. The law was not on our side, and I think at the end of the day, the things that the company will have to do to mitigate things like odors and rodents will probably work just fine. But I get it. If I lived in that part of the city, I'd be wondering, geez, will my property value drop? Am I going to have issues in terms of my quality of life? And so I get it, but I think people just need to know why we took the approach we did.
We have a minute left. Ted and I would normally be probably moderating a debate with you in an opponent right now.
Yes.
You're not in a campaign because it's now a 4-year term.
Do I look more relaxed as a result?
Probably you do, actually. Is it weird? I don't know what my question is.
The city voted in a 4-year mayoral term
right.
2 years ago. So this is the second midterm election that's happened since then. So I'm in my second 4-year term.
Oh, that's my fault. I said that to Tim. I forgot. Okay, you guys, we always are mixing up these terms in the different cities and either. It's okay, so you've gotten used to this now.
Well, I'm not pining to be on a ballot right now. But no, look, I think, so I'll just say a couple of things. So
quickly.
Well, I'll just say this. I want people to get out and vote. When you have these midterm municipal elections these days, as you and I have discussed before, Ted, it's hard to get people to show up to the voting booth. And so it's going to take us some extra effort this time to get people out. But I encourage everybody to
big council races in New Bedford.
All right,
vote.
Mayor Mitchell, thanks for joining us.
All right,
See you
thanks,
next
guys.
week on Newsmakers.